There we go. Good evening. I'm Sally Pavey. I am chair of CAGNE. Let me pin myself. And that is Communities Against Gatwick Noise and Emissions. We have, thanks to your donations, been leading the way in holding Gatwick accountable about this new runway. Let's be clear, it is a new runway at Gatwick Airport. So tonight's session, Gatwick Airport, new runway is not a done deal. Is really important. The what is perceived by the Secretary of State's announcement that she has approved this Northern Runway project is still up for challenge. And that's what we hope to dip into this evening. We'll cover a bit of the background, the hearings, the development consent order, the legal team that was at the forefront of that challenge, thanks to your donations, as well as the qualified experts that enabled us to really hold Gatwick's feet to the fire like never before. A few of them are present with us this evening. Our key solicitor, which we appointed in 2018, is Lee Day Solicitors. They need little introduction. They're very well known, and we're delighted that they were willing to join with CAGNE in seeking to firstly address the master plan of 2018, which Gatwick announced with 3 runways. This new runway that's just been approved is interim. It's an interim runway in their view. They're still safeguarding the land for a 3rd runway. Anyway, now I'm just going to check that Lee Day are present because there's so many of you this evening. Bear with us. I have to just see if they are have arrived. What is key, and I think I've touched on it just a little bit, is that for us to go forward with a judicial review of this new runway approval, we will need funding. And you have been amazing already with your donations. But unfortunately, judicial reviews are not cheap. And so every little helps, to use the Tesco's strapline, if I may borrow it for this evening. We would really welcome donations. And you can donate directly to the Crowd Justice, which goes directly to Lee Day, if you'd rather, or you can visit cagne.org page, and there's PayPal, there's the address you can send checks to, or bank transfers. We take it in all forms. So let me just, if you bear with me a moment, let me just check that we have Rowan with us from Lee Day. And he can unmute himself if he is here already. Oh, there he is. So I'm going to ask him to unmute. And
hello. Hi.
hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Let me unpin myself.
Hi, Sally.
And
Hi, everyone.
let me, before you start, Rowan, bear with me. Oh, you've just disappeared. Are you still with us?
Huge apologies. I'm having problems with my video,
That's what it is. I can't find you.
which I'm trying to sort out in the background. 1 second.
It's always the way it lets you down, doesn't it? Not to worry, we can hear you. That's the main important thing, isn't it? Ah, here we are. I can see you. Yay. Right, let me pin you. Right. Oh no, I've got Estelle. Hold on.
Hello, hi everybody. Very nice to see you.
I was after Rowan. Sorry, Estelle. Bear with us. Rowan, there you are. Right. Okay, they jump around so much on this screen. Right, okay, go for it. Right, Rowan, Lee Day, Rowan Smith, Lee Day Solicitors. This is your moment.
Great. Hi, everyone. Some of you will know who I am, but I'll introduce myself. So I am a environmental lawyer at a firm of solicitors called Lee Day. Thank you for the introduction, Sally. And we've been working with CAGNE and supporters for over several years now. The team here is made up of myself, quick snapshot of my CV. I'm experienced environmental lawyer. I've worked on some of the most high-profile climate change cases in the last few years. Most notably working with Estelle on the Surrey Hills case that many of you will know about, which was a successful judicial review in the Supreme Court. So we have, between us, gone from through every stages of a environmental judicial review like this, and we've seen some lows and we've seen some very high highs. So in that sense, there's not a lot that we haven't encountered before. So yeah, we're embarking on this journey with you all, with you know, with yeah, real sense that we want to do the best job possible, and are very committed to obviously getting the result. I'm working alongside a bigger team at Lead A. One of the more experienced lawyers, Julia Erickson, she was involved with you and CAGNE during the DCO examination. She's currently abroad, so she's back at the end of this month, so we'll be rejoining the team. We also have Romany, who's a trainee solicitor who's recently joined our team, and she's also assisting legal team at Lead A. Yeah, so is that okay to start with, Sally? And then obviously I'm very, very happy for people to ask away. And do I hand over to Estelle? Is that how you'd like to?
Let's hand over to Estelle. Let me pin you so everyone can see you.
Super.
So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's my very great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Estelle upon King's Counsel. I am an environment and planning barrister, and I have been working on climate change matters for since 2016 at the very least, maybe a bit earlier than that, and certainly on climate related matters concerning airport expansion for a very long time. I was involved with the Bristol Airport application, Leeds Bradford Airport, London City Airport, obviously Gatwick. I'm involved with the legal challenge in relation to Luton as well. And it's been a real privilege, I think, for me to work with a number of different local communities on these airport expansion cases, because there's been a real kind of pooling of expertise and a learning over the years that we've been working on airport related matters, such that I think there's been, we've realized that we can kind of push the boundaries of legal decision making. And one of the things that is incredibly exciting about the Gatwick decision, in a way that we haven't seen before, is we have seen a shift. We've seen a shift, and I know it's glacial and that's not great for climate matters, but we have seen a very significant shift from decision makers not taking climate really, not really being even receptive in the way that they should be to climate related arguments, to now we're starting to see that those arguments are being taken very seriously and are being engaged with. And indeed, what we can build on in this case, which is very exciting, is very positive stuff that the examining authority said that we wanted them to say, and that the Secretary of State, in fact, rode back from. So one of the great things about the potential for this legal challenge is to get the really good stuff that the examining authority said really promoted through a good High Court challenge. I am delighted that I'm working with two junior barristers, because this case, as Sally and those of you who have worked on the documents will be very familiar with, the thing about a development consent order process is it is exceptionally complex and document heavy. There are thousands of pages of material. So it is a daunting, it's a daunting prospect to bring this kind of legal challenge, which is why it needs quite a big team and quite an experienced team. So I'm really pleased to be working with two junior barristers, Ruchi Parekh, who is a very well-known senior junior. In fact, she just won Junior Planning Barrister of the Year. And Odette Chalabi, who is a more junior, but is really exceptional in terms of her legal kind of nous. So with that team and with the Lead A team, and guided by the subject matter experts that CAGNE has been able to engage on noise in particular, but also on surface transport and on air quality, we will be trying to put together the most strong strategic case that we can to bring this kind of line of airport case law really a big step forward. There's a real opportunity here. And I hope it's the kind of opportunity that you feel you can get behind, and you can get behind this team to try and really move things forward.
Okay, thank you. So just to tell everyone, did you win an award this year?
Yes, thank you very much, Sally. So thankfully, I don't have the trophy with me, so you will be spared that. But yes, I won Barrister of the Year this year with Chambers and Partners, and it was this kind of work and my wider climate-related work, which was the reason for the award. So, and I won Planning and Environment Silk of the Year last year. So it's been a year of success, and we hope to build on that with this case.
Yeah. So you invested in a trophy cabinet with Gatwick.
Yeah, me and Ruchi and Chambers were like, we need someone to put our trophies and the next ones. Yeah, thank you very much. That's very that's lovely of you to say, Sally. Thank you very much.
No, your steering, leadership, and holding of hands during the hearing has, as you know, really enabled us, and I will always remember the Gatwick King's Counsel looking very red when you started quoting the Finch case at them, because he was well out of his depth when it came to environmental law. But anyway, so thank you so much. I appreciate your time this evening, and I'm going to move to Tim of Aviation Environment Federation, if I may.
I think you've muted, Sally. So.
Oh, no, I haven't muted you. I'm back. You there? I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Tim Johnson of Aviation Environment Federation, Director. Thank you so much. Your input, as always, is invaluable when we are up against Gatwick Airport's expertise, feeding into it with Estelle's team and Lee Day's team. We're one big partnership. But Tim, if you perhaps can just give us a few of an insight. I know you're at the Labour conference talking about this mystical sustainable aviation fuel that so much of Gatwick's case is based on.
Yeah, happy to, Sally. Just a few words of introduction. So yeah, I'm Tim. Aviation Environment Federation is an environmental NGO. It's a membership body. It represents the communities under flight paths around airports, and it's our 50th anniversary. So we had a nice little celebration last month. Again, marking some highs and some lows, but the fact that we're still here and we're still fighting, I think it was the main thing. Most of our member issues relate to noise and airspace, but we also focus very closely on the climate impacts of airport expansion. And Sally, you've asked me to say a few words about that, and I'll do so. I mean, it stands to reason that if you add a second runway at Gatwick, you are going to get a significant increase in carbon dioxide emissions. There's no way of disguising that or hiding that. There were figures put forward at the examination in public that I think questions the airport's numbers and said that they will be much higher. But even the airport's numbers can't get away from the fact that this airport with two runways emits more than it does with one. And let's not confine the argument to carbon dioxide. You only have to look up in the skies over the southeast on any given day. You'll see the contrails that crisscross the skies. Those contrails and other non-CO2 impacts historically have actually caused two-thirds of the climate warming effects that are attributable to aviation. So yes, focus on CO2, but let's make sure that we don't let them escape with not focusing on non-CO2 as well. And although there's very little on that in policy, in targets, even in the decision letter, there are good reasons why we should be. If you're an airline flying from Europe to the UK today, then that leg of the flight's already covered by a monitoring and reporting requirement from the EU. So you're already reporting your non-CO2 effects if you fly to the UK. We just don't do anything about the takeoffs in this country when they happen. Um, and we also have, you may have seen, the government has had a Jet Zero strategy for the last 4 or 5 years now, which is supposed to be a partnership with industry to help deliver its aspiration of net zero. There's even a Jet Zero task and finish group on contrails and how to avoid them. So given all of that policy interest and the noise around it, why don't we see that feature more in decision making? Now we're probably going to see the government's justification on how it can square airport expansion with climate change when it produces its carbon budget delivery plan later this month. But isn't it interesting that that comes later this month and not before the Gatwick decision, so that we could hold it up to the Gatwick decision and see how they believe these two things can be reconciled. We don't believe they can be, but the carbon budget delivery plan will give us a clue and actually provide the basis of our challenge and how we can stand up and say we don't think this will happen for this reason, or we don't think that's plausible because you don't have the policies or you don't have the right drivers. And so that's going to be a really interesting document. Talking of things that haven't yet come out, but will also have a bearing, the Parliament has an environmental audit committee, comprises MPs, crossbench, and they've been looking at how expansion can be reconciled with the UK's climate targets as well. That report is also imminent, and that's something else that government knew was coming. In fact, the minister gave evidence before that committee not so many months ago. And so, there are two things there that will actually help to focus and highlight the climate impacts of expansion. And it feels to us that the Gatwick decision, rather than waiting for these two things to come out, take them into account, think about how they relate to policy and whether it's sufficient. I think there's a little bit of nervousness there about actually maybe we can't provide the answer, so let's get Gatwick out in advance. You asked me about SAF, Sally. Now, SAF is the so-called sustainable aviation fuel. What it is almost everything that is not fossil-based fuel. So most kerosene that's used by the aviation industry today obviously comes from fossil-based oil. But it is possible to power planes on things that don't come from fossil fuels. It could come from waste material. It could come from organic matter from crops. You could even manufacture a synthetic aviation fuel. If you capture CO2 from the air and you mix it with green hydrogen, you could have a synthetic alternative to fossil-based fuels. And we're as sure as we can be that the government's answer to Gatwick expansion and its climate impacts will be, but don't worry, we've got so-called sustainable aviation fuels. But I think there's really good reasons why we collectively should be challenging that assumption. Yes, they've put a mandate in place, and that mandate requires all fuel suppliers who are fueling aircraft in the UK to ensure that 10% of all the fuel they said in 2030 comes from these alternative sources. Yes, they have a mandate, but I think there are already signs from the industry itself that they think that's going to be really challenging to meet. And we know that because at the moment, the UK mandate excludes some of those pathways I described. For example, at the moment, you cannot use crop-based fuels. I mean, the UK recognises that that puts additional pressures on land in the UK, puts additional pressures on land that's growing food, and rather than compromise those, it's better to exclude them altogether. But the industry is currently knocking on ministers' doors and saying, well, why don't we use cover crops? So when you have a main crop in the summer, we sometimes have cover crops that are used other times of the year that are supposed to return nitrogen and other good things to the soil that will boost next year's harvest. Why don't we harvest those cover crops and turn them into fuel? Maybe we could relax the mandate. And we think that's because they recognize that there is only so much waste that you can collect and turn into aviation fuel. And that's going to be a really limited supply, not only in the UK, but globally. So let's relax it. We think that would be not only relaxing the rules, but lowering the environmental integrity. But the government's got a stark choice, it appears, that it either lowers environmental integrity or it sticks with the current rules, in which case it might have a shortfall. So certainly one to watch out for. I think the government has been already influenced by industry lobbying, and it's already said that later this year it will actually consult on whether we use cover crops. We just think it's the thin end of the wedge. Cover crops come in, and before long we'll be being told there's huge amounts of corn ethanol in Brazil, in the US. Other countries have access to that. Why can't we have access to that? So um, we think it's a limited market, and a lot of the sustainability arguments are at best questionable, and at worst are actually damaging and not delivering what they claim to do. I think the other couple of issues I just mentioned briefly, Sally, if I may. One is that some of you may have been disappointed this year that the Climate Change Committee report no longer contained a direct reference to the need to constrain airport capacity in the UK. So this is the advice that the Climate Change Committee, they're statutory advisors to government, but it's the advice that they give to the government. And previously they had been really strong that there should be no airport expansion. And in the latest report that came out earlier this year, that advice no longer appears. But actually, I would say don't worry. I think it's a different presentation of the argument. And I think, despite their messaging, they've seen airport expansions being green lighted over the last 2 or 3 years, and they're trying a different tack. And what they're saying now is if you want to meet your climate targets, you really need strong carbon pricing. And strong carbon pricing, not the sort of levels that we have today through the UK emissions trading scheme or internationally through the UN's offsetting scheme, significant increases that actually means it makes sense to try and invest in alternative technologies and cleaner fuels. Whereas at the moment, it's just a cheap way of meeting your climate obligations, and nothing really changes. So I think the CCC's focus may have changed, but its advice is really good. And if you look at it carefully, it quite clearly says if we're going to make progress on the climate arguments, they don't expect any growth over the next 10 years. Well, modest growth, 2% increase over today's levels by 2035. But they really want time to sort of stand still. If these technologies and fuels are going to succeed, give them time to come in and show that they're actually reducing emissions before we take our foot off the brake and perhaps do it. So I think some really strong arguments in there that we can hold on to. I think finally, I wouldn't, it's not really a climate point, but I really think the need argument for Gatwick needs to be really closely examined and challenged. It was only 3 years ago that government modelling shows that there was going to be a 70% increase in demand in the UK between now and 2050. But within 1 year, a few changes to the modelling assumptions around the GDP growth in other countries saw that fall to 52%. So it just shows you how sensitive a lot of these forecasts are to the assumptions that you make. But I think, we included this in our evidence to the examination in public. But when you look at the um, demand and the modelling that the government did in 2022 and 2023 that led to those figures, it also quite clearly shows that if you allow all airports to expand and the airlines have free choice where they operate from, it looks like the government's model shows they do not choose to operate from Gatwick. And Gatwick actually has a really weak demand case in that model. And I think arguments like this really need to come to the fore alongside climate. I've probably used my time up, Sally, so I'm going to stop and hand it back to you. But very pleased to be working alongside you and Rowan and colleagues at Lead Day, and of course Estella and the team.
Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. I think, unfortunately, Safe Landing Finley Ash can't be with us this evening, so I do apologise for that. He's come down with a terrible cold, so he's asked me to put some links in the chat, which I have just done. Safe Landing is a group of individuals. It's quite a powerful body, and they are employees of aviation who believe that the environmental impact of aviation is actually going to reduce jobs and make aviation less sustainable on the job front. And jobs was obviously something that was key in the Gatwick submissions during the hearings, and it's a strapline you hear all the time. But in actual fact, along with us and local authorities, it was very questionable what type of jobs they were going to be. And as we've seen historically, it's seasonal jobs at Gatwick. And unfortunately, a lot of them are minimum wage and they can't afford to live locally. So again, something we submitted through the hearings is that most of these can't afford to live locally. We have a lack of unemployment currently, and the housing being built is not affordable. So it brings more people onto the road because the public transport is expensive and it's not viable, it's not there. So surface access, that's the traffic, that's the roads and the railway, has always been Gatwick's Achilles heel. It was when Gatwick was up against Heathrow in 2014, and nothing has changed. If anything, it's got worse. And so that's another area where they were very disingenuous with their submissions, and they continued even after the hearings had finished. So there's an area there as well. And if we really want to get dirty, we brought up the subject of overflowing sewage because Thames Water is their wastewater treatment plants, and both of those are overflowing. They're facing mass housing, and with 80 million passengers plus workers and auxiliary hotels, car parks, etc., we got the shareholders of Gatwick, or should I say Estelle, got Estelle team and Lead Day's team got Gatwick shareholders to agree to an on-site wastewater treatment plant. The Secretary of State has decided to leave this with no guarantees and open discussions with Thames Water. So the likelihood of seeing that investment again is minimal. So you will know better than I, when we see housing and planning permission, you're promised healthcare, schools, even stations. But when it actually comes to it, you don't get it. So we're very much in that area with Gatwick Airport. And what we're seeing is Gatwick pushing the traffic with their increased drop-off fee to neighbouring areas. And this is obviously a major concern for the local authorities because there is no funding coming from Gatwick Airport for major improvements in the infrastructure to get these people and these workers to the airport, to and from the airport. So the team of experts that you funded really enabled us, as I said before, to hold Gatwick's feet to the fire here, as well on noise. We had Suono, who were phenomenal in really pulling apart their noise argument. And so, again, the Secretary of State has really not taken this forward. And so another area of weakness for us going forward. Now, CPRE Sussex, the director couldn't be present this evening, but the director of CPRE Kent is here. But I'm delighted, and I'm going to put him on the spot here. We've got Professor Dan Osborne, who was until recently the chairman of CPRE Sussex. And I wondered if Dan, who was at the hearings, etc., if he would just give us a quick insight, because both branches, all the branches, have supported CAGNE and the legal team and the expert team throughout the hearings. And I'm delighted to say that they are continuing to support in a united front. So what with them, an excellent KC and her team, really, top class solicitors, and the likes of AEF, Safe Landing, New Economics Foundation, as well as lots of other environmental groups and individuals, where we really do have a strong team going forward with this judicial review. And at the moment, the letter of intent is being drafted to submit with the intent to serve a judicial review. This just cannot be accepted that the taxpayer ends up paying for this new runway, as does the planet. So, Dan, if I can put you on the spot, I'm trying to now find you. You've disappeared from my screen. Bear with me. Perhaps you can
wave, Sally, so that you can see.
Oh, that's very kind of you. That makes life easier for me. There we go. Dan,
Okay.
on the spot,
Okay.
could you just
Okay.
give us a quick insight?
Righto. So CPRE, Sussex, Kent, Surrey, etc., are concerned about the quality of everyone's environment, about the landscape, the tranquility, how clean it is, clean air, etc. And the Gatwick proposal is difficult to square with those kinds of ambitions. And the way the Secretary of State has given permission involves quite a lot of what I would call, in Yes Minister terms, brave thinking. In fact, magical thinking in many ways on the part of the Secretary of State. You've already heard something about the sustainable aviation fuels. Leading members of the aviation community, like the CEO of Ryanair, is on record now as saying that the sustainable aviation fuel ambitions are basically unachievable. There just are so many supply problems, and the prices will be so high that it's not a viable option for the sector. Another issue with this kind of thing is that the claim of sustainability in a climate sense is difficult to kind of square with the reality of the fact that what you're doing is moving carbon from the terrestrial environment into the atmosphere. It may eventually, some of it, be reabsorbed. But what we don't want is more carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. And if you use these fuels, it's exactly the same amount of carbon dioxide coming out of the engines as you've got with fossil fuels. And so there's a really major problem about the believability of that kind of approach. Another thing that's very difficult to believe, and on which the kind of the decision is really grounded in many ways, as is the application, is that in some way there's going to be a technological revolution in aviation in the next few years, which will enable zero emission flights of things of this kind. And really, when you look at the government's Jet Zero strategies, the 1 year on document and all these kinds of things, there are problems in delivering any of those technologies. The technologies really simply don't exist and won't come on stream for decades in any way that's going to influence the emissions that are coming from aircraft. The magical thinking is remarkable because the government's own kind of documents about this have photographs in them and on their covers of little more really than cartoons. They're artists' impression of future aircraft to a very large extent. And even the Chancellor is on record as saying it's okay, if you like, to proceed with some of the aviation expansion because of the existence of some of these non-existent technologies, such as electric aircraft and things of this kind. And so all these kind of technological things really do make the decision difficult to believe, which means that, you know, the Sussex countryside, Kent countryside, the residents in the countryside and the surrounding towns are still going to be subject to increasing amounts of noise, etc. And what is very disappointing in the public hearings was the reluctance of the proposers of this second runway at Gatwick to take full account of the kinds of impacts they were having and how some of those might be ameliorated. And they simply would not consider capping either the numbers of aircraft or the amount of emissions. And if they're signed up as an industry, as a sector, to Jet Zero, that means they've got to find a way of getting to net zero. And Jet Zero doesn't get there. Even the government and the sector's own plan leaves them with half the emissions, roughly, to deal with that they've got today. Someone else has got to deal with a huge amount of residual emission. And that really, to me, isn't good enough. That is not following the polluter pays principle. That'll do it from me, Sally, I think.
Yeah, and I think you know, very much the CPRE, you know, doesn't want to see the countryside built on, but it also doesn't sort of see the affordable housing coming forward now for the current population, let alone if we have inward migration of workers, etc. It's just a cocktail of negativity, really, isn't it? But thank you so much. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Dan. That was really
no, that's fine. Sorry, thank you.
Appreciated. What I'm going to do here now is there are a number of the committee online this evening. So if I unpin myself, and if I could just ask the committee to put their cameras on. Not all the committee are here tonight, but some of them are. If you put your camera on and just give us a wave. Aidan, Jane, oh, see Jane. So Jane, Liz, Caroline, where's Aidan gone? Oh, there's Andrew. Give us a wave, Andrew. Andrew's the important person. He's treasurer. And Aidan is there somewhere, but I can't see you. But I'm okay. You can turn your screens off now, boys and girls. Thank you. And what we're going to do is I've put in the chat basically how you can support CAGNE. If you're on our mailing list, you'll receive a recording of tonight, so you can watch it back at leisure. Please share it with others. But without you, we will not be able to afford to go forward. So if you're willing, please donate to us. You can, as I say, donate directly Day through Crowd Justice, or you can donate via our website. We have our bank details there, we have the postal address for checks, and we have the PayPal account there. So please donate to us. And we are so appreciative of your support. We've been going since 2014. We've grown beyond belief, and we hope that we are providing you with a service. I know the last two events we've held, Airspace Above Your Home, have been really well attended. And so those recordings will go out along with the recording of this one in our next mailing. And please do contact us if you have any questions, but we really do appreciate your ongoing support. because we are volunteers and we are the same as you. We don't wish to see more aircraft above our homes. We don't wish to see the area becoming the same as around Heathrow, and we most certainly want to leave a planet for future generations, and do not believe aviation should benefit far more than us or the planet. So I'm going to try and do something that I've never tried before, so bear with me. It's a little film which was done by CPRE director. I hope you can all see that, and I'm just going to play the film before we finish this evening. I appreciate we are overrunning.
Hello, I'm Paul Stephen, director of CPRE Sussex, the Countryside charity. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I wanted to make sure that you know we are 100% behind you in fighting this decision. A new second runway at Gatwick, because let's be clear, that's what this really is a disaster for local residents, for the Sussex, Surrey and Kent countryside, and for the global climate. The campaign to protect rural England was founded nearly 100 years ago to protect our beautiful countryside from urban sprawl and to preserve its beauty, peace and tranquility. Hundreds of thousands of additional flights means hellish noise for many close to the airport, and it also means further noise blight of family countryside walks, including in the Surrey Hills, the High Weald and Kent Downs National Landscapes and the South Downs National Park. Little by little, we're going to lose the peace and the escape from the hustle and bustle that these countryside jewels are supposed to offer. An expansion would also mean huge new pressure for housing for people moving to the area to work, at a time when Crawley has already declared a housing emergency, and when green fields where skylarks nest and food is grown are already disappearing under soulless, car-dependent estates. The pressures on air quality, sewage treatment and congestion are seemingly just waved away in the Secretary of State's decision, dismissed in pursuit of highly questionable hopes for growth of any sort. Most depressingly of all is the government's fantastical approach to the risks of climate breakdown, seemingly living in a magical world where fuels that don't yet exist and can't be scaled up deliver emission-free, jet-zero aviation. The government are sending us further and faster down a path that is already seeing crops lost and homes flooded here in Sussex, and where turbocharged extreme weather is already killing people around the world. Climate change is the biggest threat to the countryside, and so CPRE across the region stand with you all in fighting this appalling decision. No to airport expansion, no to a second runway at Gatwick.
Thank you. Well, that was a good point to finish on. Actually, we're ahead of time. It's probably because we've missed safe landing this evening. So I'm going to stop us there, unless anybody has a question. We do have 15 minutes to take questions. So if anybody would like to, I'm going to unpin myself, and if you can raise your hand, that would be great. Along the bottom of your screen, you should have react, and there you'll find a little hand if you want to ask a question. Otherwise, pop it in the chat, and I will answer it from there. I appreciate that we probably encapsulated a lot this evening, and one of the things that we had to be careful of is obviously we don't know who is on the Zoom call this evening, and so we could have actually Gatwick Airport on this call. So if you do have specific questions that we haven't addressed this evening and you'd rather ask them directly to us, please email us on cagnegatwick@gmail.com. Do write to your local newspapers about opposing this runway. Write to the national papers opposing this runway. Believe me, MPs do read these publications, and it does make a difference. CAGNE has already spoken to parish councils and town councils, but you could urge your parish or town council to get behind CAGNE and donate to CAGNE if your area is going to be impacted by this new runway and the increase in aircraft noise and the increase in pollution, etc., etc. And you can also write to your Member of Parliament and ask them to oppose this new runway and to stand firm and to speak out publicly against this runway. We have asked the Lib Dem MPs to do a joint letter. You could ask your Conservative MP, you could ask your Lib Dem MP. It makes a difference with members of Parliament if they get a letter from a constituent over CAGNE sometimes. So the more letter writing or email writing you can do, the more it helps our campaign and it helps us in opposing this new runway. So I've not seen any questions in the chat unless I've missed any. And I haven't seen any questions.
There are 2 questions in the chat.
Oh, are there? Thank you for that. One big issue is, right, okay, let me just, thank you for that. Okay, question for Tim. Oh, Tim, are you still with us? Yes, he is. What portion of flights cost is generally proportionate to fuel? With SAF costing 5 times more than conventional fuel, if available at all, what does increased fuel costs do to demand and this the need argument?
Yeah, so I did post a response in the chat to that question, but I mean it does vary by airline and for the low cost fuel's a bigger percentage of operating costs than it is for the bigger carriers, but it can be up to 40%. And at the moment, SAF prices, sustainable aviation fuel prices, are at least 2 to 3 times more than kerosene. So potentially it has a big impact. You can actually see why the industry is arguing for a relaxation of the rules. I mean, I said there's potentially a shortfall in 2030. That's one reason. But actually accessing potentially cheaper alternatives is another reason to lower those costs. Will it mean that airfares go up proportionally? No, not straight away. I think I said that the government's mandate, so this is the law that requires fuel suppliers to provide a proportion of the fuel as SAF. That's only 10% by 2030. So 10% of the fuel will be costing 2 to 3 times more. And obviously, when you average that out, you won't see quite remarkable price increases on tickets. But I think it's worth saying that when Jet Zero first appeared, the biggest wedge of emission reductions that the government assumed actually came from these carbon prices affecting demand. Now, at the same time, other costs are going down, so there is still, in their model, increasing demand out to 2050. But it's, yeah, done properly with high environmental integrity, and we don't limit the ambition. If it is scalable, then it will have an impact on costs. That's for certain.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I'm just beavering away here. Someone's asked about Route 4. I'll just reply to you in the chat to that one on Route 4. But there is a piece in our September newsletter, if you're on our mailing list, which is an update on Route 4. Basically, it goes to civil aviation in October, and you should have a public consultation early next year on that one. So, and there was one for Lee Day.
Yeah.
The Environment Act, challenges, and then the other one.
I apologize. I can't see the full chat for some reason.
Okay,
but
I've heard that a JL can only address procedural errors in the process.
Yeah.
Is that true? And if so, how does it apply here?
Strictly speaking, yes. What we're analysing is the lawfulness of how the Secretary of State has arrived at the decision. So some describe that as a process challenge. So you're right in one sense, but that's not the complete answer, because you can there's points that are described as errors of law. So if the Secretary of State has misinterpreted policy or the statutory provisions, then that can also amount to a reason that the decision is held to be unlawful. So it's slightly goes further than process. But even on the procedural points, that's not to downgrade them, because many decisions are held to be unlawful on process points. So even if those are ones that we are arguing in the case, that doesn't mean that we have any weaker case.
Okay. How unusual is it for the Secretary of State to essentially ignore a lot of the proposal from the examining authority? I think this is quite outstanding, what has been done by the Secretary of State here, and how she's interpreted.
Yeah, well, it's not uncommon. There are previous examples of it. For example, on the Stonehenge development consent order, that was originally recommended refusal by the examining authority, and then that was reversed by Secretary of State. So yeah, there is some precedent for it. And also Sizewell C as well. That's another example. So yeah, so we have seen it before.
Okay, all right. So oh, we've got another one. Hold on. I'd love to hear thoughts on Aidan's question, restricting JRs.
Oh yeah. So this government seems determined to neutralise any meaningful opposition. What impact do you think this will have? So I think that's a very valid question. There's obviously things happening politically that we don't have much control over. We can only react to. So the one short answer is that the court will only be interested in analysing the lawfulness of the decision that's already been made. So subsequent policy changes at government level are irrelevant to that question of whether the DCO was granted lawfully. So that's one sort of simple answer. It gets slightly more complicated, obviously, than that, but that's sort of the baseline. Where we've seen the changes have a slightly more direct impact on this case is that the government recently changed rules that meant when you challenge a development consent order, the process is truncated. We knew this rule was coming in. We knew there was a strong likelihood that the new rules would apply to our case. So we've expected it for some time. We're not overly concerned about it. It just essentially means that the process is slightly fast-tracked. It still means that we will have an opportunity to present the case and have a hearing to establish whether the case can proceed. So yeah, so we're prepared for all of that. But what quite happens, at national level now doesn't have much of a bearing, because we already have the decision, we already have the clock ticking, as it were. The judicial review claim, if that's where we end up, that claim will go in, and once it's in the court system, then even if there are subsequent changes, they won't apply retrospectively.
Yeah, Yeah, it's I suppose it's a bit like the airspace change, them trying to change the consultation process. If things are already in motion, it can't be retrospectively done. So in a way, I suppose it's a yay, we've got in there first. But shame we're in this predicament. Anyway, great stuff. Okay, anything else? What's the deadline for letters to MPs, etc.? It's an ongoing thing, but obviously the keyboards need to be hot, and typing currently, I think the more pressure can be put on the Secretary of State right now would help. The more that's in the newspapers always helps, even whilst we're serving a judicial review. To still have negativity from individuals in the newspapers and to have negative stories about aviation in the papers, it all helps in determining views of individuals. But what we would say is that it would be great to have joint MPs come out now and say we really object to the Secretary of State's approval of this. You know, we've seen Friends of the Earth make a statement along those lines, but elected members coming out, it's quite a step, especially when they do a joint letter or an open letter to the Secretary of State. And if they ask difficult questions of the Secretary of State because you've written to them asking about, you know, what's going to happen to the surge you see in your residential road currently, or the night flights that you currently have going over your house, or why aren't you being compensated for the loss of house value because you're going to have 2 runways going over your house. All those things are really important, and you might get a very standard reply. But if you feel that, believe me, if you fill their inbox with objections and concerns, with the May elections coming, and they may seem a long way off, all those things might not seem to help, but it is people power. It is a bit of a numbers game to try and put pressure on these people. There is so much aviation lobbying going on. Just to answer the questions in there, anyone in the press who can investigate the political lobbying that Gatwick have employed to get this runway. CAGNE had lots of media coverage. We were straight on the case when the announcement was made. I was told of rumours on the Friday evening, and then I was told Sunday lunchtime that it had been approved. Yeah, I know BlackRock sat next to Kia, but they're allowed to do it apparently. So there is so much aviation lobbying, and I'm sure Tim Johnson will tell you there is so much aviation lobbying, especially over a sustainable aviation fuel. The government's already spent 115 million on sustainable aviation fuel, and aviation is a luxury industry that makes very healthy profits. So there's huge question marks over the economic benefits of aviation if you add all those things in, alongside the fact that Gatwick exports more people out of the UK, so sterling going out of the UK than it brings in. So I think that's it's not a good decision. Unfortunately, Labour does seem to be very negative about the environmental impact of aviation growth and airport expansion. I think that's really, really sad. So we've got a minute to go. I'm just going to ask, Rowan, have you anything to add you'd like to say?
Just very quickly, because I didn't come back on Terence's reply about the Environment Act. That wouldn't be the only route to make an illegal argument about noise. Probably don't want to say any more than that because of Sally's caveat before about not going into the detailed illegal arguments. But suffice to say that we're looking at routes that don't rely on the Environment Act. Yeah.
Okay. Tim, would you like to add anything?
I think we've covered the issues far and wide. I mean, there's always more to talk about, but no, I think I would just end by saying, as I think all the speakers have identified, that, if this was an argument that was based on technical facts and evidence alone, you know, the government would have followed the planning and inspectorate's recommendation for refusal. So I think, we have the arguments on our side. Now's the time to use both the law and our lobbying efforts to get politicians to listen to that message. But I just add that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so on that note, it's just 1 minute past past. Thank you ever so much. Thank you to all our speakers for attending this evening, giving up their time to come along this evening and talk to us. And it's great to have such a strong team in going forward. It's not going to be an easy ride, but we've come this far. We can't stop now. And so I'd like to say thank you ever so for attending this evening. It's really been well attended. And thank you for your support of CAGNE. And please continue to support us.
Thank you to you, Sally, for organising this and all the other stuff you do for CAGNE, etc.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, be without people like yourself. Very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
you.
Good night.
Thank you, Sally.
Everybody.
Good night.